Hey, what's up guys, TechTine here, and I've spent 48 hours with the all-new Galaxy A17. And so for the past 2 days, I've tried my best to use this phone as my daily driver, and I was able to come up with some thoughts on this device. So this is your 48-hour review, and essentially it should give you a pretty good idea on whether this phone is going to be worth it for you or not if you're interested in the Galaxy A1 lineup. So let's begin with the obvious, which is the price. It has not been officially released in the US, but internationally it has, and it's around $250. And this is the 8 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gig of storage. So the price may vary once this phone launches in the United States, but it has been said that it's gonna get a price bump. So we'll see what's up with that. Now, one of the other categories that we have to speak on is obviously within the design. So this is definitely more of a refined phone than a complete design overhaul. So on the back, instead of that glossy material that we got on the previous generation, you get this sort of a matte finish that is smooth and it's extremely slippery. So if you do end up picking up this phone, I highly recommend a case. Another, if you can call it another major design change is the fact that now this phone is noticeably thinner. So now it comes in at 7.5 millimeters as far as the thinness, and it's also 8 grams lighter at 192 grams. So that's also something that we have to note about this design. And of course, on the back you have your triple camera setup that highly resembles the A26 and the A36 models of previous generation. And if you can see, the kind of outside has the same gray coloring as the back panel itself, so nice attention to detail. Now if we look at the right hand side again, you'll see your power button and your fingerprint sensor, but more importantly you'll also see that that indentation that they introduced in the Galaxy A15 has gotten smaller, which is much better in my opinion. Now it becomes clearer where the power button volume up and down lies. In the something like the Galaxy A15 and A16, it made it a little bit more difficult to kind of click on these buttons. The A17 has the same rating as the previous model, which is the IP54 rating, and that basically means that this phone is splash resistant. Overall though, it may not be a major design rehaul. However, they did make some notable changes like a thinner phone, a lighter phone, and sort of a, I guess it's not really new, but somewhat of a new camera housing design for the A1 lineup. Now, the next conversation that we have to discuss here is within the display, which they really didn't change much. It's essentially the same display from the previous generation. So it's a 6.7-inch display, 1080p Super AMOLED, 90Hz refresh rate with the same large bezels. Now, is that a bad thing? Not really. However, if I do want to complain, I do have to say that I have problem with the front glass, which is extremely reflective, and this phone does also max out at 800 nits of peak brightness, so that's also another something to note. So it didn't really get brighter, and we still have that same reflective panel that I'm not really a big fan of. I mean, you can see the reflection. So if we want to look at it from a quality perspective, so yeah, this phone will definitely meet most people's demands as far as of a decent quality display. Now, yeah, some people will complain about the bezels, me included, but that's something you have to live with for a sub $250 device. Now, when it comes to watching your content, it's just as good as you would expect with that 1080p AMOLED display. The 90Hz does a pretty good job in a high refresh rate. However, I would have sacrificed that 90Hz for smaller bezels and for a little bit of a better anti-reflective coating on the front. But that's just my personal opinion. Overall though, the display, while not changed from previous generation, is still a solid display. Okay, so now I want to switch the topic of conversation and talk about the camera itself. So they did change a couple of things. Well, mainly one thing. So they added optical image stabilization to the camera system. So now you get a triple camera array with your main sensor being 50 megapixels again, but with optical image stabilization, a 5 megapixel ultra wide and a 2 megapixel macro sensor. The front facing camera gets a 13 megapixel sensor as well. The interface is just what you would expect from Samsung: quick, easy to use, point and shoot, nothing too crazy or nothing too dramatic. Switching between your main sensor and your ultra wide may not be the fastest that I've seen, but it definitely has gotten better over the years, so I'll give them that. Taking pictures is almost instantaneously. Switching between your photo and your video mode is quick, and obviously there's going to be quite a crop once you do that, but switching between sensors, like I said, is pretty good. Now, I do have to complain that this phone does max out at 1080p as far as video, so no 4K yet again this year, even though they could have. And it might not be the best pictures that you'll ever take out of a phone, but they work and they work decently well. Now, just for the fun of it, right? I did make a small comparison between this phone and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. So this picture, for example, has been taken on the A15 and this on the 16 Pro Max, similar to this sample, A17, 16 Pro Max. So you make your ultimate judgment, and here is a quick sample video. Hey, what's up guys, TechTime here, and this is your sample video recording of the Galaxy A17 5G. So we're closing in on sunset, and it's not as dark as this phone makes it out to be. So the exposure can be fixed here, but with that being said, it doesn't really do a good job in auto exposing the images that come out of this phone, and even video, as you guys can also tell. Now you can switch between your main sensor and your ultra wide simultaneously, but obviously the quality will take a bit of a hit. And you can even take it a step further and go into the selfie mode while recording video. So that's your selfie 12 megapixel sensor, and we're recording video off of that. And this phone maxes out at 1080p, so no 4K video on this model, which is a little bit disappointing, but that's what you get. We're out. So from a performance perspective, they really did not change much here. It's basically the same chipset as the previous model, which is the octa-core Exynos 1330. You also get 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage, and that's just my particular model. They will have a lower RAM and lower storage option available as well. No word on pricing yet for those options. And yeah, a 5000 mAh battery, 25 watt of wired charging, no wireless charging of course, but overall though, from a performance perspective, I didn't really notice any change from the previous model, to be honest. 712 for your single core, 2114 for your multi-core as far as synthetic benchmarks go, but from a user's perspective, for the past 2 days, for the basic tasks, it did just what I expected out of it. Did it crash? Yes, it did. From time to time, this phone did crash on me, so that's also something to note. And honestly, these phones are notorious for slowing down dramatically after a certain time of use. So that's also something that you must keep in mind if you're in the market for these phones. But like I said, it comes with a price. That's why it's ultimately Samsung's entry-level device. I did game on this phone, lighter titles, and what I experienced is that the first 5 to 10 minutes were fine. After that, this phone did get warm, and I was able to notice it at the top where we're nearing the camera system. And yeah, I mean, it still worked. I mean, it's still fine. It didn't really overheat or anything too dramatic, but that's also, again, something to note. Overall, though, my experience with the Galaxy A17 has been the following. This is, again, definitely a refined model. So they were able to achieve a thinner, lighter model while giving us the same battery life and basically the same specs as the previous generation, which some might see this as sort of an achievement. I think Samsung's team did. Otherwise, they really didn't change much of the phone. So with that being said, the big question becomes, is this going to be worth it for you as a user? If you're a fan of the Galaxy A1 lineup and you had the previous generations, is this a compelling enough phone for you to upgrade? Now, if you had the A16, I really don't recommend upgrading. It didn't really change much. If you have a previous model like the A13 or the A12, then yeah, go ahead. Upgrade to the A17 if that's what you're into. And so with that being said, the question comes down to you guys and your guys' thoughts on this device. Is it something that you were expecting? So is this definitely something that you would be interested in, or are you disappointed that they didn't really change enough? Especially considering that this is one of Samsung's most popular devices. So let me know. With that being said, I want to thank you all so much for watching. I do greatly appreciate you all. Leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.